Good afternoon and welcome to the first Commit Happy Hour of 2021, here Friday the 22nd of January at 3:30. Today with me in the happy hour and enjoying their own beer, gin, wine, beer, tea, whatever it is they are having to sup this afternoon to keep themselves awake and alive, as a great organisation of people looking at advanced work packaging. Joined by Stuart, Jeff, Robin, Lloyd and Gary, who we're going to hear from in a little while. But first of all, what I want you to do is to listen in to Stuart, who's going to tell us a little bit about the productivity initiative and then hand you over to the team. So welcome once again. Enjoy the next hour or so. And Stuart, over to you.
Thank you, Ian, and welcome to everybody. So the first question is, everybody's joined this webinar today. It's headed up, led, developed and delivered by COMIT in conjunction with the participants today. But what is COMIT? Well, COMIT is a collaboration platform of client owners, of contractors, of solution providers and academia. COMIT has a long history of developing and running demonstration projects with its members and the wider community. It focuses on increasing value through productivity improvement. COMIT recently, and in conjunction with one of its members, EMS, developed a solution app for COVID-19 tracking on site, currently installed, receiving raving reviews and keeping everybody safe. Behind all the technological initiatives in our industry is a simple goal, and that is improving productivity. Often the best improvements come from a combination of knowledge, the people, the process and the technology. COMIT and its community has identified with the major barriers facing our industry and has developed a unique opportunity to create enablers with the potential for beneficial change that would lead to cross-industry improvement. By being collaborative with all of the stakeholders, we create new ways of enablement through process improvement and ultimate demonstration projects. The long-term aim of this is to reduce capital project costs by up to 30% and a reduction in cycle times by up to 10%. Okay, I'm going to say this now right at the beginning. I know that you're going to have a lot of questions. We're going to save the questions to the end. We've got a specific slot. And if we run out of time, we've got a little bit of a backstop. We call it extra time lock-in. But please put your questions in the questions box, as you can see in the control panel there. We thrive on questions. We're really looking forward to your questions. This will be new to a lot of people, so put them in, send them over. Okay, so what are we talking about today? Well, first off, I'll say welcome to today's session entitled How to Hit the Ground Running Using Advanced Work Packaging. In just a moment, we'll have some of the world industry experts on the subject, and we'll discuss how to become more predictable in our projects, how to reduce costs and schedule time, plus other improvements, including safety. For those that are not yet in the know, advanced work packaging is the overall process flow of all the work packages. It is a planned executable process that encompasses the work on an engineering, procurement and construction project, beginning with the initial planning, continuing through detailed design and construction execution. Advanced work packaging provides the framework for productive and progressive construction and presumes the existence of the all-important construction execution plan. Okay, now I have some poll questions. So the first thing I will do, everybody at the ready, I'm going to launch these questions. I have 3 poll questions that will gauge opinion and thoughts. So my first question, you should be able to see that now. I've launched that. Where are you on the AWP journey? Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So
That's
we've got not started yet. Sorry, Ian, carry on. Beg your pardon.
I was going to say, that's an interesting question. I think when we look at the answers coming in, they'll probably differ quite significantly from industry to industry. Coming very much from the infrastructure world, I think we will probably find that not many people will have started yet, or they're just having a think about it, or they're aware of it. But I think when we might have people from the plant and process industry and the oil and gas industry, I think they're going to be a lot further down the line. But it will be definitely interesting to see where they are in their journey.
Yeah, sure. The okay, just give it a second or two more. We'll close that up, and I'll share that. Can everybody see the?
Oh, interesting.
Isn't it? Good opportunity there.
Yeah. And I think that probably reflects a lot of the organisations that we in COMIT do interact with. I suppose, historically, we've been more biased towards the infrastructure and I suppose government-style projects rather than towards plant, process, oil, gas, energy, renewables, and the like. So that might actually be reflected in that, but it's some interesting results.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ian. Okay, so let me go to the next question. How did you first hear of AWP?
Oh, very good question, actually. Obviously, I'm not allowed to vote on these things, but I think the first time I came across it was actually dealing with the oil and gas industry through one of my colleagues in Canada, I think it was. And I was stunned that actually they had this really good way of doing things, and yet my world, the infrastructure industry, just hadn't engaged with it, didn't know what it was all about, and really hadn't been getting on with it, when to me it looked almost like a no-brainer that we ought to. And this was probably about 10 years ago.
Yeah. Okay, second to two more. Nearly everybody's voted. Thank you. Okay, let me share that.
Yes, I can concur with that, the work colleague, because I think one of the things we probably lacked during this lockdown period is having those work colleagues to have sort of unsolicited conversations with. You bump into them at the coffee machine and go, "Wow, I saw something really cool today. It was all about whatever it might be." And I wonder whether, as we move into the next year and we start going back into a workplace, whether that sort of thing might increase also as we start to talk more to our work colleagues in sort of off-the-cuff conversations rather than specific agendaed online meetings.
Indeed, indeed. Thanks, Ian. Okay, so the final question I've got here. Are you and your organisation constantly challenged to the following and need to implement changes for? You should be able to see that now. So reducing schedule time, improving safety, certainty of meeting target dates, reducing costs, or all of the above? I thought it'd be 100%.
Yeah, I think if it isn't all of the above, then it's an interesting conversation, because if you're not constantly challenged by all of those, whether by your client organisations or by other governance type bodies for things like improving safety, then I think, yeah, you're probably not quite in the same world. But it'd be interesting to see. You might find that there's an organisation out there that already does all those, no worries.
Yeah, nearly it. Okay, so I'm going to close that and I'm going to share that. So 87%, all of the above. Fantastic. Brilliant. Okay, thanks very much for participating in that. Some great information. And anybody wants to see that afterwards, we can share that. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next slide, and if it will just move on to the next slide. Actually, it's jumped on a couple there. So it's meet the team. So from left to right, I've got Lloyd, and then I've got Gary, I've got Jeff, I've got Robin, I've got Stuart, and what I've said to everybody is briefly introduce yourselves, and as you come to each particular section, and I'm going to start off. I'm going to start off with Lloyd, as I say, from left to right. So Lloyd, over to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Great. Well, thanks for inviting me, Stuart. I appreciate it. So I'm the president of the North American Community of Practice, and my day job is being the president of Group ASI. I've been involved with advanced work packaging since the early 2000s. Got involved in developing the work phase planning model with a number of the people on the panel, and was part of the team that developed the advanced work packaging model as well. We used to provide consulting services, but now we focus solely on bringing AWP around the world through events, conferences, summits, and so far. So Stuart, could you move me to the next slide, please? So the advanced work packaging community of practice, this started in North America, but we've grown and we now have a South American chapter. There's a Russian chapter that's getting started. There's a European chapter that's just in the process of getting launched. And we're in discussions with the Middle East and with Japan as well. There are currently 1,700 members in the North American chapter. We've got about 1,700 members in the South American chapter. And at the rate we're growing, by the end of this year, we think we'll have about 15,000 members worldwide. So one of the things about having these various groups is we talk to each other and we share information. And we know that each of the regions has some great ideas. And as an example of collaboration, could you go to the next slide, Stuart? The European chapter, the North American chapter, and COMIT have decided to work together to put together a slate of webinars that are AWP related. And you can see between now and June, we're planning on doing 16 webinars. Now, that's not the full programming, because in North America, there's going to be some additional ones that we do. There likely will be additional ones in COMIT and additional ones in ECI. But I think you can see we've got a range of topics here that'll be happening over the next 6 months. All of the speakers that are going to be invited to put these sessions on are subject matter experts, and generally most of them have local and global experience. So hopefully these topics will be of interest to you. You'll be able to register through COMIT, through the ECI chapter, or through the North American chapter. We've actually just set up a LinkedIn site for the European chapter, and I believe there's like 3 of us right now as the starting members, but we'll be putting out information on that very shortly. You don't have to be a member of ECI to join the community of practice, so strongly recommend that you get involved. And I think that when we put the program together, whether you're experienced or whether you're new to this, you'll find a lot of really good content in there. Next slide, please, Stuart. So there's 2 things that the communities of practice are really supporting, and that is the global adoption of advanced work packaging and other construction performance improvement methods. So we're not saying you have to use AWP, there's no value in other methods, just the opposite. We believe that lean and other methods have great value, and rather than working on just one approach, we're actually working to combine the various approaches together. This conference that's coming up on April 20th through 22nd, we have probably 80 speakers. We have 4 different tracks, so you can hear about it from an implementer's perspective, from a technology company perspective. There'll be lots of great case studies, and we've got best practices where organizations like ECI, CII, the Construction Owners Association of Alberta, COMIT, are all going to be presenting at the conference. And one of the things that we're really excited about is we've got Spencer Kelly speaking on day 2 as our keynote, and he's going to be talking about technology. And we've got on day 1 representatives from Shell talking about their journey, and then on day 3 we're going to be talking about using these approaches to get green outcomes, which we think is very relevant. So there's a link there to the website. Go take a look, but I think you'll find there's an amazing amount of content that'll be available to you. Next slide, please, Stuart. The other thing that we found is in order to have effective AWP implementation, people need to understand what it is. And so we've partnered with the AWP University. They are offering courses in North America, in Europe, and they're also going to be offering courses in South America. The North American and UK Europe options are listed here. One of the things that they've done, and we really appreciate it, is in order to help get adoption going, they're going to have instructor-led courses, 3 instructor-led courses on these 3 topics, and they've deeply discounted the rates. And we appreciate them doing that. But I don't want this to be a commercial. So if you're wanting to get more information, there are links to all of those courses, but let's jump right into the session. Next slide.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. As you can see, I'm currently working for Eastman. I'd like to say, first of all, my experience is in project management and more an implementer of AWP. Many years, over 36 years in project management. And if you could move on to the next slide. Please, yeah. This is where I currently work. As you can see, all the nice green fields around the site. It's in Newport, South Wales. Part of my role is expanded to look after our 12 European sites as well. So the first point I'd like to emphasize is, how do you embrace AWP when you have a smaller organization or a smaller plant site? And that'll be the focus of my presentation this afternoon, or the few slides I'd like to share with you this afternoon. So it's a processing chemical engineering site and practices, and that's where we've adopted it. So if we could move on to the next slide. So from a chemical manufacturing perspective, we touch all the main disciplines: civil, steel, piping, electrical, as you can see. What I often say as a project manager, you must have the vision to see what the completed project is going to look like, and that's easy to say than to do, and certainly at the conceptual stages of a project. But once you get a picture of what the project will look like, then look at dismantling it in a way that makes sense. In other words, break the project up to help with what we call the systems approach, to identify how to start the plant up safely. And further what I think goes hand in hand is not only thinking about the systems approach, think about AWP and the construction approach, and how that can fit and support your startup planning. And these all lead to a successful project. So with this thought, as early as in the feed, the front-end engineering design, that is, you must give some consideration to the end game. What is the project going to look like, and what you're going to start that up. So for me, the AWP was a key missing link, because with that in place, the confidence in approving and meeting your startup date is greatly increased. Not only that, you can see the point about safety. I mean, safety is number one in every chemical industry, and it certainly improves safety along your journey. Next slide, please. So what is the Newport site? Again, going down to the details of a smaller site compared to our headquarters, which is in the US, in Kingsport. A lot of information has been generated by our headquarters, and we as a smaller site looked how to adopt and modify that information to make sense. And as you can see a few pages below of our work packages that we created. And the key message from our guys at the site, if they were presenting now, would say, take small steps in the process. And in other words, don't be too concerned about implementing everything from the beginning. Learn by small steps and move through the process. Next slide, please. So the other learnings that we definitely found is allow early implementation in your schedule to work with your contractor to bring them on board, so that they can assist with the final work packaging. It's easier on a smaller site. You tend to have what we call house contractors or regular contractors that you work with. On a large EPC, that they may be further on down this project schedule before you get a chance to engage with your contractors. But on a smaller site, these resident contractors should be readily available to engage with early in the project cycle. Another key learning is the staging of material. Get your suppliers to work with you, again, align with them so that they can ensure that the material is sorted, boxed, and it arrives when in particular you need it and in the priority and the sequence that you need it for your workplace planning. Again, one of the emphasis on which I've mentioned is that the upfront planning, particularly where we have a lot of permits to work systems in place, provides that clarity of what is coming down the line. So efficiency in terms of waiting for permits and that can be lost time is reduced and saved. Safety issues are discussed up front. It's all about clarity of scope and clarity of work. And finally, which is again coming from the chemical industry, the turnover approach of how are you going to start up that plant. Unless the contractors are fully on board with the sequencing and the work packages, you can end up missing great opportunities here. So the alignment of the turnover approach with your AWP practices is a significant benefit for our industries. I think that's next slide. I think that may be it. Yes. So if there's any questions, will catch me at the end of the presentations. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Gary. Hey, hopefully you guys can hear me now. My controls tell me that you can. So, hey, a couple of things. I just want to touch on those last couple of presentations before we get going here. So first of all, Jeff Ryan, I am the CEO of Insight AWP. We're a company that's been operating for about 15 years now. We have about 20 employees. We're working on 8 projects around the world. We supply project management coaching, if you like, to organizations that are trying to do AWP. So we have lots of experience in that space, and I'm going to touch on a little bit of that today. But before I go there, I just want to say a couple of things that I made a note of. So first of all, Lloyd said there might be 15,000 people enrolled in our COPs around the world by the end of this year. That is an amazing feat, and it really is endorsement for what we're talking about here. This is a simple process. The world has the worldwide organizations and projects have the same problems, and we're all trying to collaborate and fix those. Only other thing I want to point out is a great presentation by Gary there, and he talked about the benefits of actually doing this and to take baby steps. That was a great piece of advice. Thank you for that, Gary. Okay, First slide, please, Stuart. Okay, so what I've done here, I've just got 4 quick slides. I'm just going to have a quick few minutes with you guys. I see that from our initial poll that we had over 50% of people either don't know what AWP is or are just for the first time kicking the tires. So I didn't want to dive into some of the details of information management or how you structure engineering. I just wanted to talk about essentially what is it, and when we are talking to organizations about trying to get their head around what this is a very simple way that we do that. So this is basically this design that we've got here is essentially the logic that you carve up a project into packages, and the world in an AWP world, the world rotates around the CWP. A construction work package is 2 or 3 months work. It's one discipline. It's a sort of a chunk of work, and the logic is that if we decide we want to do that work, then we want to build a package that is all the material we need for that work, which is procurement, and then of course in order to support that we need an engineering package which gives us all the engineering we need to support that work. Once we've got to that point and we've got all of these construction work packages organized into a sequence of events that we want to address, then we can give one of those construction work packages to the construction guys and say, okay, now break this into small packages. Now, when we talk about installation work packages, we are talking about, in our world, we are talking about 1 week of work for one foreman and crew. And you will find everybody has an opinion there about how big those packages should be. After you've done this a couple of times, you'll realize that it's really, really difficult to work with big packages, and it's much easier to work with small packages. It takes a bit more effort, but it actually makes the process work. So anyway, in our world, when we get down to installation work packages, then the instruction is basically don't try to do that work before we know we can, which is constraint management. And know that you've got the right documents, know that you've got the right materials, and know that you've got scaffold and access, and it's the right thing to do, and it's in the right sequence of events. If you can hit the next slide for me, please, Stuart. I'll give you an idea of what that might look like. So in our process of applying AWP, we use software. We use a variety of software. We don't have any ourselves, but we use off-the-shelf software that you guys can also use, of course. It is essentially based on the 3D model as a database, and you interact with that 3D model, and that allows you to, if you like, build things like this, which is essentially a visual of what our 3-week look ahead might look like. And you can see that this communicates that message very strongly and very, very well. Of course, if there's a variety of software out there, and most of them will also tell you sort of how many hours are involved in actually doing this work. A couple of key elements that we have in AWP and workforce planning is that alignment of engineering, procurement, and construction. When we get into construction, we talk about workforce planning. This is really the workforce planning software that we're talking about here. This 3D model and the software that we use is like the interface, or that point of contact that the planners use with the rest of the project. And then they work in that environment to know, okay, this is what we would like to do. And then of course they can ask the questions on, do we have that material? Is that possible? Is it in the right sequence? Has prerequisite work been done? Anyway, the 3D model really does facilitate the whole process of bringing these logic of package work and constraint management together. You can hit the next slide for me, please, Stuart. So, what's it worth, or how much value or benefit do you get from it? So, I'll talk a little bit about one of the ways that we measure that. There are obviously the traditional ways of measuring a project, which is that we measure how many hours it took us to install pipe or steel or concrete. But of course, it's a little hard to keep a pulse on as you go through the project. That's really good numbers we get at the end of the project, but it's a little late by then. So one of the other ways that we do this is that we conduct tool time studies, where essentially a guy is walking around the field for a week. He's taking snapshot observations of all the workers he sees, and every time he sees a worker, he says, okay, that guy is involved in either a direct work activity, he is in a support activity where he's getting ready to do work, or he's being delayed because he doesn't have something. So he's waiting for typically information, tools, materials, or access. So when we crunch all those numbers at the end of the week, we end up with average direct activity levels, which is really time on tools. How much time did these guys spend on tools? Now, one of the other critical pieces of this survey is people don't decide how much work they do. We decide that. We put information, tools, materials, and access into the field, and that allows workers to work. So when we do a study like this, we're not studying how engaged the people are in the field. We're studying how good we are at giving them work to do. So that's really important, because essentially the whole structure of workplace planning is about getting prepared before we put that work in the field. So anyway, interesting, this is a project in Europe that we did in 2018. We were on the project for a couple of years. We got there late, and when we got there, the project management said, well, it's sort of up to the superintendents whether they do this or not. And so we sort of talked to all of them, told them what this was, told them the service we were going to provide. We're going to take one of their guys, make them a planner. They're going to build plans for them, make sure they've got the stuff. About half the superintendents said, yeah, okay, we'll do it. And the other half were like, no, we'll be fine. So interestingly, when we did a survey of all of those areas, this is the data that came in. And you can see the red dots are the superintendents who said, no, I'm just going to do this the traditional way. And the green dots are the ones that said, okay, I want work packages. And you can see a difference in the level of activity in between the red dots and the green dots. It's just like the simplest example of how much more you get done and how busy people are when they have the right material, they have the right documents, they have access to the workfaces, and they know what they can do. So anyway, if you see a website at the bottom there, www.timeontools, we've been doing this for about 20 years. We've got oodles of data. We've done piles of projects. You can go there and you can slice and dice that data, and you can have a look to see, how are these numbers comparable across the world? How are they comparable with packages or without packages, full-blown AWP or half AWP? So anyway, if you're interested in data and the impact of AWP, we're actually building up quite a bank of data that shows the true impact. You can go to the next slide, please, Stuart. So I'm just going to finish up by saying that the point of these presentations and the webinars is to basically give you guys the tools you need to do this. And we, as a company, we've created some stuff that we think will help you down that journey. We've got some YouTube videos. I'm going to play one of them here in a moment. But we've also got a guidebook on it, even more scheduled for sale. $25 online for the hard copy. I think you can buy the electronic copy for $3. So we're not quite giving it away, but basically we want you to know as much as you possibly can. If you want to go to our website, you can download procedures. There's all sorts of other tools in there. But besides us, there's a whole pile of other service providers in the industry that are also trying to do the same thing. They're trying to give you the data and information tools to be able to do this. Now, having said that, I'm going to play a video, and I'm going to use it as a lead into the next presentation, which I think is really good. Robin is going to talk about education and training. Now, one of the tools that I'm giving you today to take away, I guess, is that this video is on YouTube with a whole bunch of other videos, so you can go there for free. So when you go back to the office and somebody says to you, so what do you learn from that AWP conference, you can say, well, go to YouTube and watch the videos, and that'll give people an introduction to what AWP is. And then, of course, you've primed the pump ready for the sort of training that Robin provides. Now, having said that, let's see if I can make this video work. I'm going to unplug my... Okay, let's see if this works now.
Can you hear me, Jeff?
I can. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what happened there, but sorry, carry on.
And how does it affect you? The simple explanation is that the process of advanced work packaging guides the dissection of project scope so that it supports the execution of work. It starts with the processes upstream of the construction work package and aligns engineering work packages with procurement work packages. This populates the construction work packages with all the drawings and materials and gets them ready to be carved into installation work packages by the construction team. There are two other important elements of the bigger picture: workface planning and information management. In a coal mine, the workface is at that point where the pick hits the coal. In our world of construction, it is at that point where our tradespeople
can't see the video.
plant. Therefore, workface planning is the process of identifying what these people need and what we must do to get it to them.
Yeah,
Yep.
Information management
can't see the video.
Can you show your screen?
needs information.
What
So,
can you
when
see?
we develop information, we need to
You.
right people have
Oh,
access
that's
to
no good.
it is compatible
There
with
you go.
other information.
Can you see the
You look at any model for solving problems, it always starts with a lot of focus on what is the root cause.
There we go.
It's up
Now
now.
we
Do you
can
want
see
to
it.
restart it?
it's on now. I
Yeah,
turned it
would
off.
you mind?
Okay, so you know what? Can you guys see me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just leave it there and say, okay, all the people on the webinar have some homework. Go to YouTube, plug in advanced work packaging, and find that video, and that will be a good way to check out how you're going to access it in the future.
Brilliant. Do you want to
It
point
is a
the link?
great 4-minute video.
Thanks, Jeff.
Hey, no problem.
Okay, over to Robin next. Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Wait a second.
Unmute myself here. All right, excellent. So thank you very much for that, Jeff. You touched on a lot of great points, and I appreciate organizations like yourself that have a lot of learning materials out there to help guide in the education of the industry, if you will. And that's really the sweet spot for me, obviously, as being the president of the AWP University. We've been now around for just over a year formally as the AWP University, but myself and my partners bring the last 30 years of experience in the development of, I'm not sure what happened, there we go. Last 30 years of development around AWP into the AWP University. Myself as the president, I've been involved in research groups since the turn of the millennia, if you will, for quite some time, both with COA and CII, helping develop 272, which is often referred to as the Bible for AWP. And I've trained well over 5,000–6,000 people in AWP over the years, and I've actually worked with several of the people on the panel here in that capacity. So next slide, let's jump into a few things that I want to talk to you here about today. Some of the things that we're going to get into is really how's things changed. I think this is really apt. You know, I don't want to go too far down the basis of how our world has changed due to COVID, but there are some very obvious changes, and some of those are that we've moved to a much more virtual world where we are working from home. Hence, here we are in a remote session, speaking to you all now. Things have changed a little bit. Online materials have become more of a mainstay, where once upon a time they were nice to haves and people preferred or thought they preferred in-person instruction, when the truth is we're finding that we're getting much better results out of online self-directed learning and online augmented learnings. So as the world has been somewhat closed for renovation, I like to say that it's not that the world is closed, but that we are changing. and I believe for the better, as we're better utilizing some of the tools that we've got at hand to be much more productive. And when it comes to AWP training, it's really all about being as productive as we can, and to utilize the tools to the best that we possibly can. As Jeff was talking about, doing time on tool studies and those types of things, that comes right down, not just for your execution on site, but also into your educational programs and how you set up for your AWP program. And being efficient is utilizing certain tools in education that are now available. Next slide, please. So as we move into a world that has changed a little bit, if you will, for some of our education practices, AWP in general requires a certain level of education. It's good to get general understandings, but then from the basis of getting into what's really needed to become true practitioners is highly important. And when it comes to building up your AWP curriculum or how you're going to educate your personnel, there's a couple real key things to take away as far as what to consider when you're setting up how you're going to educate the masses, if you will, within your organization or your project. One of the very first things is high-level first exposure course materials. That's extremely important. Jeff was just mentioning he's got a bunch of great videos out there, and they are great videos. I'm saddened that we couldn't show the 4-minute video, that we had a little bit of technical trouble with that one. It's a great video, and I commend Jeff and his team for putting it together. Those types of high-level first exposure materials are important to get everybody to have a taste of what it is that they're trying to achieve with AWP education and the AWP program in general. Then moving on to your detailed role-based training, getting to that level now of, okay, I know how to spell AWP. I know I'm supposed to bring this forward onto my project, but what do I need to do? What does AWP to me mean? How is it that we need to bring it for our organization and our group? If I'm a project controls manager, what do I have to do to support AWP? If I'm a work phase planner, what does that really mean? That role-based specific training. When you look at a curriculum, regardless whether it's through the university or just in general, is what I'm speaking to you here today about, you need to focus on what it is that the individual is going to be doing to focus on AWP and become a contributor to the AWP environment. Limit that drinking from a fire hose general overview type training that's prolific in the industry that everybody comes away with going, okay, that was awesome, but what does it mean to me? Make sure that there's role-based training within your organization. Flexibility in course curriculum to match student requirements, limiting exposure to unrelated topics. Often what happens is, if you don't have flexibility in the curriculum where your curriculum's not modularized or it's not broken down into small enough pieces that the student gets what really makes sense to them. For instance, an example of this is you don't want to train your frontline supervision in how to build a Primavera schedule. They may need to know how to read it. They may need to know what the impacts are of it. They may need to know how to progress against it, but the actual Primavera development or WBS structures, that's not necessary. So we need to be focused with the training environment to ensure that we don't overload our students and our project personnel, so that we teach them what they need and the overall basics, but the details on what they really need to do. Then the next thing is we don't want to limit them. So don't misunderstand the last bullet. We don't want to limit them, but we want to lay out a career path learning and goal setting environment for them. So when you set up a training environment, you want to start training with bits and pieces. You want to give them the information that they need to be successful now, but you need to lay out a learning path so that they can be successful tomorrow. And everybody wants to achieve, everybody wants to move forward. Nobody wants to be stagnant. So laying out that career path and having the tools to do that are extremely important. So from these 4 bullets, I want to bring this forward to you because regardless of whatever tools or whatever organizations you're using to help educate your personnel and yourself in AWP, these are 4 things that really need to be considered to ensure that you're bringing this into whatever program you set up. All right, so next slide. So a couple things specifically in here. When we start talking about the delivery requirements of that. So the last slide was specific to what your program needs to look like and what that needs to bring forward to how you need to address the AWP environment and train your individuals. There's certain ways today that we need to deliver that to our personnel. And one of the ways that we need to deliver that to our personnel from these 4 bullets is we need to bring forward online learning management systems for self-directed learning. It's an important aspect today. You know, instructors like myself, we can't travel for obvious reasons today. We do a lot of online instruction, online instructor-led instruction, as Lloyd was talking about with the 3 courses that we're going to be releasing and delivering for certifications, which is key to those particular courses. Also, there's workplace planning and advanced work packaging basic certifications in those. So we need to bring forward that online training, and you need an online management system to do it. If all you do is take snippets from places, you're going to get a general awareness, but to track and be able to test against and ensure that the competency has been there, you need systems in place that are going to bring that forward to. Online train the trainer engagement. Now, many organizations are not going to engage in training for all their personnel from outside sources all of the time. It's more cost effective to bring in and educate master trainers within your own organization to be able to bring forward the learnings and what needs to be set up for an AWP program. So bringing forward your delivery requirements to have an online train the trainer engagement is extremely important. Instructor-led online course delivery options, meaning that, you know, how do we deliver materials online? Can they take it self-directed? Are the materials there to be reviewed? Like Jeff was mentioning before, he's got many videos on YouTube. So with those videos on YouTube, is there somewhere that those students can access easily the course delivery options? Meaning, is it online somewhere? Are the videos in YouTube? Are they in an LMS system? They need to be easily accessed, as well as having an instructor-led option. Some students thrive in a self-directed environment. Some students falter and can't seem to get past the first module in a self-directed environment. And today, people learn very, very differently. There's many different methods for learning, and one of them is to actually have a live instructor, an instructor-led online course delivery. Having that option available is highly important. You know, there's many situations that I've dealt with in the past. I've consulted or implemented on over 100 projects now in my 30 years in construction. You know, having been on the front lines in the early inceptions of workplace planning and AWP with the likes of Lloyd Rankin and Jeff Ryan. We were all there in the beginning, and I can't believe we're here nearly 20 years later on the same thing, and we're talking about this in a worldwide engagement. It's impressive that it's taken hold. And as Jeff was referring to, and what Lloyd was mentioning, 15,000 people in the COPs. It's a movement now. It's a real thing, and it's you know, bringing that forward is amazing. Corporate LMS system enablement. In order to have, if you've got a large corporation that has an LMS system now, when you're looking for delivery options and delivery requirements, making sure that you can populate your own LMS, that you're not tied into having to vet security or go to outside sources and external LMSs. Make sure that you can load that internal LMS with data from other organizations and bringing in that corporate LMS enablement to bring those learnings into your organization. Such things as that is extremely important. To ensure that you populate and bring things forward onto yourself. So today here, all I want to do was share a few stories with you, a few guidelines for helping with your bringing forward your education in AWP. There's a lot of different levels when it comes to AWP and what the education needs to look like. Everybody needs some type of exposure to AWP fundamentals and the basics of it. You know, the videos that Jeff was talking about, some of those types of basics. But then they also need to go to the next level, right? And what is AWP to me is extremely important. Too many times we conduct training where we blast our students in our organizations with a fire hose, and they're tasked with the very difficult position of trying to disseminate what is important to them from that basis. When you're developing your training procedures and your training environment, I implore you to make sure that you're speaking to the individuals from a position that makes sense to them. That AWP to me, that role-based type training, bringing that type of environment forward, will make your AWP maturity go a lot further. And AWP maturity, there's a model that was drafted in volume 2 of 272 AWP maturity model, which helps you guide you through where you are in the maturity curve and how to and what type of benefits to expect. A lot of the same type of thing that Jeff Ryan was talking about in that great chart showing the simplicity of with and without. You know, in that there's also nuances of maturity and being able to track yourself against that maturity curve to promote your advancement through education and learnings is extremely important. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. And I thank you very much for your time. And Stuart, take it away, my friend.
Yep, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stuart Block. I'm the AWP manager for FLIR in the UK. I've been in projects over 30 years now in various industries, in various positions, but most of those have been in project controls as a planner, from construction to engineering, front end to system completions. And the last 5 years, I've been really focusing on AWP within FLIR, both out in the field with Robin's assistants and back in the home office more recently, focusing more on how engineering and procurement drives the construction element. So Stuart, if you want to jump on the next slide. So I apologize, some of these stuff has already been covered by the other presenters, but so why do we do AWP? So the main reason that FLIR looked at AWP was to increase productivity at site. The main reason for stuff being late at site is drawings aren't issued, equipment's unavailable, late materials, design changes, or even the preceding work's not completed. So we see this all the time. You get some contracts that are faster than others, some are organised, some aren't. Even down with engineering. A lot of the projects go with engineers and management want to hit quantities, but they're quantities in the wrong place. So we need to follow a path of construction. And that's the scheduler set up for the whole project. We start with the end in mind on how we're going to hand the project over to where we start the project. And we plan that out in project controls in a reasonable amount of detail, but that detail is constantly evolving as you move through the project. So some of the elements, how we can resolve these problems at site. Stuart, if you want to jump onto the next slide. So we break the project into manageable elements. So AWP works best when projects are broken down to manageable partitions. So we take it as units, the project, areas of the project, construction work areas, which are quite substantial, big chunks of work, down into construction work packages. And that the construction work package point is where we're able to release a lot of the engineering. So we do the drawings, the equipment lists, cable schedules, bills and materials. So they're really the engineering work packages. But within FLIR, we don't separate between procurement work packages, construction work packages, or engineering. We see them all as one geographic area, but broken out by discipline. And then when we get into the subcontractor role, they will develop their installation work packages because they're the experts that do this. So FLIR, typically in Europe, we don't have our own self-performing constructors. So we always rely on subcontractors. So they're the experts, and that's why we hire them to build our work packages and take this forward. Now, elements of this sort of breakdown can be seen in real life in a journey. The journey can be the unit where you see you going from one place to the other. The CWA can be your chunks in between refueling points or when you need a break. Then you start looking down at which roads you're going to take and then which junctions you might want to stop off at or take onwards. Okay, Stuart, if you want to jump onto the last of the 3 slides. So where we take our subcontractors and how we get them on board. So we develop very clear, concise requirements. We do a lot of training and continual support with the subcontractors. So we want them to work the best way that we can. Stuart, is it stopped? It seems the slide stopped bringing up.
I don't know why it's done that. Is it,
Okay, there we go. It needed a break. So the way we do that is through various bid questions when we're engaging with the contractors early, the contract attachments. We do some early onboarding training, so we get them involved before they've even put their bid in. And then once they are on board, we do early engagements with engineering to resolve any constructability items. So there's no point designing something that they can't build. I think I stopped again, Stuart. I don't know if I'll click it again. And then we come up with a clearly defined responsibility matrix. So as Robin's probably alluded to, I've used one of his slides. So work-face planners, we want people that are technically competent. We don't need people at project controls basis that can build a schedule. So we define very clear roles between the company, the EPCs, and the contractors. And the reason we design this is because who supports who? And at the end of the day, we need to break silos down. It's not a subcontractor, it's not an EPC, and it's not a company. It's one project team. So if we break those boundaries down, we set guidelines, we set who does what, we work better. And with constant support, guidance all the way through, our contractors that we've had on board on many projects, from a £300 million project to a $50 billion project, that we all work together for the same goal. And if we break it down into more manageable chunks, the better those chunks can get resolved. Thanks, Stuart.
Brilliant, thanks, Stuart. And thanks to all the panelists. Thank you very much. One thing I will say is the video that didn't play there. What we'll do is we'll craft that in afterwards. I know Ian placed it into the dialogue box on the side, so everybody have a chance of picking that up. But we will craft it in afterwards. It is well worth seeing. It's well put together, and kudos to Jeff for that. So thank you. We now get to the question time, and we're coming close to time. But one thing I will say is, for those that want to listen in, we've got some great questions lined up, and some hopefully some really good dialogue to whet the appetite. So please stay behind. We've got 2 minutes left for the hour that we booked, but we've got what we call the extra time. So please stay behind, and let's get some questions going. So can I invite everybody to come back on and put your webcam on, please, and let's get everybody back in the room, and let's get some questions. Okay, so Ian, I think you've got a couple of questions lined up. Do you want to
Yeah, I think there was a few questions that came in. I don't know who will be the best person to answer this one. So if you fancy a particular question, do just kind of like go, oh yes, please, I want to answer that one. So just also to say that I have this on my shelf. And it would be quite nice if it was signed at some point by the author. So one of the first questions that came up on there was, obviously this is happening quite a lot in that plant and process world and also the oil and gas world. So anybody kind of can offer an opinion why it hasn't really taken off in the infrastructure? So we're building a lot of railways in the UK. How come we're not? Why aren't we doing it? What's the barrier, do we think?
I'll start by answering that a little bit and start the conversation. I think there's some really good things to unpack there with that question. First off, I don't think it's not necessarily showing up in those industries. It's often shown up in those industries under different labels to make them more friendly to possibly systems that they've had in place for a while. I would point to Crossrail, for instance. Crossrail was an amazing project that was brought forward by multiple different organizations. I was with Bentley Systems at the time, and they put together a war room that was heavily guided by AWP principles. However, we didn't really call it AWP. It was a little bit different type of integration. So there's multiple different names for things. But what I would say is that the pioneers that have brought forward AWP into the industry and have beat our heads against the wall for many years to get productivity engagements such as this into the industry, we're heavily involved by trade in heavy industrial. But there are a lot of the best nuggets, if you will, from AWP showing up in other industries. And we are discussing in things like the CBA and the COPs and the CII organizations and that with a lot of those commercial organizations and other types of industries where we're starting to bring formalizing the AWP methodologies into other organizations other than just the heavy industrial. So.
Brilliant. So kind of a bit of a follow-up from that is one of the other questions that's come in is kind of, if you kind of were listening into this and you thought, oh God, this is a great idea, why aren't we doing that? What would be your first port of call? How would you go about convincing the people who are above you that this is something to pay attention to?
Okay, so maybe I'll have a quick run at that. I think any solution needs to address a problem. So that's where you have to start. What's the problem? So if you thought that you have a need for AWP in your organization, you need to figure out, well, what are we going to fix? And of course, you need to fit, that problem with this solution. Because often enough we have got to that point where in an organization they say, but why would we do it? So if you have an organization that doesn't think they have any problems, they're not ready for AWP.
Indeed, I think that whole thing comes down to that value proposition. It's something that we've been trying to drive with the Gemini principles here as we go through our digital transformation in the UK, and looking at the kind of three things that go towards the value, which is the function, the trust, and the the last thing's just jumped out of my brain. Oh no, failed the first hurdle. But yeah, trying to find that value proposition that says this is what we get out of it as not only an organisation but also as a project and personally, if I wanted to drive that forward. Okay, no, that's great. There's a couple of other bits and questions coming in here.
If I could just build on Jeff's comment, though, if I could just for a minute, because I think it's quite important. The driver for us in the chemical industry was that the construction productivity had remained fairly plateaued without any improvements for a significant amount of time. So that was kind of crying out. There's some scope for improvement there. So that was one of the main drivers for us as a company to look at that nugget, see what we could do.
Yeah, I think it's something it's on a lot of people's sort of checklist, but what does that productivity improvement mean and what value are we going to get out of it? So I can that's so I've got some questions coming in from various people here. So I'm afraid, excuse the pronunciations of the names. I'm going to say Diego Moretti is saying, is it better to work with smaller CWPs, construction work packages, for easier execution release? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I can probably take that one. There's a lot of argument about what is the optimum size for a CWP, and it's really a case of what your organization's easy to release in one go. So I've been on projects where CWPs by engineering have been too big. Great for construction, engineering can't release it in one go. And I've been on other ones where it's too small to make productivity gains on site. So it's getting that size optimum, that what is the best that engineering can release in a reasonable size package to what construction can take on to work with.
Yeah, and I suppose when you look at the different environments you're going to work in, somebody brought up the Crossrail project there, when you've got a very constrained environment for logistics, bringing in materials and then getting them down a tunnel shaft and then along to a work face. You've got to take that into consideration at the same time when you're planning that. So I've got another one here from the same guy here. How to design the path of construction using CWPs at such an early stage of engineering, with deadlines and resources unable to collect this information. So I'm presuming he's saying that, and he'll have to pop up and tell me otherwise, the fact that you need to sort of front load this stuff quite early on, and whilst you're doing the design work, yet at the same time you don't quite know what's going on or going to be happening in the construction world in the end. I think he's asking for advice there on how you might design that in.
Yeah, I think I could probably answer that one as well, because we're going through this all the time with our engineers and our projects. So at the start of the project, very early on, you know what you've got to build at the end. You need to have the owners tell you how you want the project to start up, if it's a petrochemical site, or how it needs to be handed over. And then you start building your schedule at a very high level. As you start breaking down to the lower level and more information comes in, usually when you get around your first model review, some people call it 30%, some call it 20%, then you seem to know roughly what CWP level you will need. Don't try and set it more before your first major model review, because definition won't be there. If you set it too early, then you're gonna have to redo it again later on. So it's really as the project evolves, you start developing the lower levels.
As we're going to
if I could add to Stuart on that, it's all about predictability. So take the systems, again, for going back to the system startup, before you think about AWP, think of the areas that pertain the highest risk. You know, it could be a new reactor, new compressor. Try and bring those on earlier in the overall project cycle to give you your chance for success to hit the main mechanical completion a better chance, really. So you're right, it's all about that handover and that understanding of the final project goals.
Yeah.
And
do you think
just to add to what Gary was saying, in CII, they've just released a report on how to do commissioning completions and startup using advanced work packaging. And there's some really useful information in there. So one of the things about CII is the resources they develop are developed by industry people with the support of academia. So they're very hands-on, very practical. And that would be a good resource for you if you're interested in preparing the appropriate CWPs and IWPs and dealing with switching over to commissioning, completions, and startup.
Yeah, so I was just thinking on that. So we've just published recently, I don't know whether you've seen the new Construction Playbook issued out by the UK government that talks very much around the modern methods of construction and the fact that we're looking at more modularization, more predictability within that sort of process. I'm thinking here that the fact that we have repeatable construction deliverables means we might actually have a better idea about what's going to come up beforehand, because we're almost pre-planning it by having a modular construction and a modular delivery, so therefore it's going to come right from the very beginning as well. So I've got a few more questions in here. So one from Luigi. He asks, what is the driver in adopting AWP, the project with its requirements, or the organization executing the project? So I'm presuming, sort of, if I can translate that correctly, and I'm sure Luigi will correct me otherwise, is that driver coming from the client organization, or is it coming from the contractor, from the delivery arm? Yeah.
Let me give you a quick, my quick answer on that. So to this point, it's been the driver has really been the owners, because they have the most to gain out of this. However, and Fluor is a great example of this. You know, Fluor are out there now waving the AWP flag, saying, "Hey, this is one of the benefits you get when you hire us." Right, so now we're sort of in that transition where organisations are understanding, hey, this is a competitive advantage, and of course the owners have been driving the development of it, but I think we're getting to the point now where EPCs are understanding this is valuable to have a valuable skill set and a commodity.
Yeah, there's another point, Jeff, as well, which I might just ask Gary to comment on. One or two of the client organisations that I've had experience with in the past, they're driving this because of the benefits they can get. I mean, Gary, you touched on a little bit at the beginning, but they're actually encouraging the EPCs and everybody else in the chain to get involved at every turn. I mean, you just need to look at some of the oil and gas majors, and there are serious efforts to get everybody on board with it and drive it in the right direction and make a difference. And it's commendable, to be fair, and it's really making a difference. And it's that sort of testimony. I think, you know, you guys have shared some of that today. I mean, Stuart's in a great position there where he's able to influence it from the ground floor up, and some of the results are fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, there's a whole bunch of questions come in since we started. There's one, I don't know whether Ian you touched on this one, but Dave Milnes asked about how he talks about PM. Hang on, can I read this correctly? Project management body of knowledge. How does that differ from AWP? That's something I've come across before, but how does that differ? Who wants to tell that question? Jeff, you're laughing.
Well, I'm laughing because, you know, Robin and I and Lloyd are all PMPs, and you know that we were trained in the PMBOK method, and you know what? This is it. This it fits hand in glove with the PMBOK methods. What do you think, Robin, Lloyd?
Oh,
Absolutely
completely agree.
I mean, you and I took it together, Jeff, and back then when we originally took it, it became a foundation for a lot of how we move forward with preaching AWP forward. So I would say not only does it go hand in hand, but partially from the point of view of you and I learning and Lloyd learning about the PMBOK and PMI when we did, it was foundational to the AWP development as well. So there's a lot to do with just plain good project management, right?
Yeah.
Of course, it doesn't get into the detail that AWP is, but it basically says you have to break up a project into chunks and you have to do them in the right sequence. Well, that's what it is. Yeah.
The PMBOK creates a great framework for proper project management, and then AWP is how you actually do it, right?
Yes, there you go.
Just to put out a plug though, CII is actually developing an AWP body of knowledge guide, very much like PMBOK, and Robin is on the development team, and that should be coming out fairly shortly, right, Robin?
It is. The BOK for AWP will be, the first version of the BOK will be released within the next couple of weeks for review and some public consumption. Now, I say the first version because what we're actually using the BOK for is there's lots of evolution in the industry around AWP over the last few years. The first version is going to be summing the research together, if you will. And then as a team in the CBA, we're going to continue to move forward with that body of knowledge to evolve it so that we can actually change it. Because you don't change research, but you do change some of the lessons learned, if you will. And we're going to be capturing that within that. And it does follow a lot of the same kind of lines as the PMBOK did, you know, bringing it back to that original question. So it's not only was the PMBOK foundational and just project management done well in AWP's the specifics, but we're starting to link the two even more as we move forward by creating similar materials.
Sure. Okay, do you want to get the next question in? I've got a couple more here hanging back, but do you want to get the next one?
Yes, sure. So I've got one from Alexandra. It says how to approach the contractor team when they have never implemented AWP. In my opinion, the problem is that they can't picture how AWP will help them achieve their goals because they already have their way of working.
Can I Yeah, can I comment on that one?
Go ahead, Blake. I'll follow up.
Through the COPs, we're seeing this happen a lot, where organizations, global EPCs, really high quality EPCs, they've established universities, they've got policies, they've got procedures, they've got the resources to do this. Then you go to the contractor and you say, well, we want you to use this new approach. There is a real strong need for training people, because if you don't understand what you're asked, you're going to do the best you possibly can, but what you're providing may be your interpretation, which just look at the documentation on advanced work packaging. Just to read the RT272, which is the AWP, it comes in 3 volumes. There's another document on verification. There's over 700 pages of documentation. As Robin said earlier, the contractors don't need to know everything, but they need to know the things that relate to them, and they need to know it really well, and it doesn't need to be overly complicated. So I think Stuart did a great job of explaining how it gets chunked, but at the contractor level, you have to understand, well, okay, how do I create an installation work package? When do I have to recall it? How do I execute it? What has to happen from a materials management perspective? What has to happen from a project controls perspective? And then we only want to train people on the information that is necessary for them to effectively do their job. So I would say with the contractors, it's often not that they don't want to do it or that they're resistant to it. It's that they just don't know where to start, and we need to help them. And I think it's great that companies like Eastman and Dow and others actually take their contractors and help them at the beginning to explain what they're looking for. And then at the EPC level, companies like Fleur will actually take them and say, here's what we're looking for. But definitely, they're going to need some support when they get started, and that can be done through training, but I think it also needs to be done through the owners and the EPCs. Anyway, my thoughts.
Yeah, Lloyd, I think that's great, Lloyd. I think and that's hitting the nail on the head. I'd simplify it a little bit and bring it back to looking at where the development of these procedures actually came from in the first place. Why would the field push back? Why would people that have never done it be suspect of it? The truth is, just when you're trying to bring it into an organization, you talk about what it is and what it's there to benefit. And what it's there to benefit is, things, even though we've done things a certain way for many years that have worked, that's never been perfect. And the problem is, coming from the field myself and also from the engineering office, I've got a unique view of having been a foot in both sides. What ends up happening is, in the field, we're given a lot of poorly organized information and have problems dealing with it and trying to figure it out. From an engineering point of view, we're not really sure what we should issue when. And that's a prolific issue within the industry, and it's just the way projects operate, even though it's how we've done it for years. In bringing in AWP, what you're trying to do is put a wrapper around streamlining all those processes. So when you're dealing with an organization or a field personnel that says, we've done it this way and we don't need to change, just appeal to the fact, okay, well, is that perfect? Do you get all the information you need? Is the information great that you get? Is it parsed the way you really want it? And they'll always go, hell no, that's not the way we want it. We'd rather have it this way. Well, that's AWP. Let's talk about how we get you the information the way you need it. And then it opens the conversation, right? And that's really all we're trying to do, is get the right things in the right places.
Yeah, sure. I've got a couple of questions here, nitty gritty questions, and I'm going to aim the first one at Stuart, if I can. What is it going to cost me? Very simple. What is it going to cost me? And what resistance have you encountered in implementation?
Okay, we'll start off with the cost one. Yes, it will cost. Extra planning does cost. Planning up front does cost money. And convincing owners that they've got to spend a bit earlier to save more later is always the goal. They're always apprehensive of well, will it really save? So that's where we just go through previous projects and explain to owners that they need to pay a bit more up front. But certainly when it comes down to the contractors, they want every guy on their tools. But when you're explaining to them, as Robin stated, what caused them problems and wasted their money, because most of these will get paid for what they install, certainly in UK and Europe. And when they work down what they wasted their money on, they're quite willing to put extra money up front. And usually, to start with, we've seen owners have actually put their money up front to train people to get them as workplace planners. As it's going down, it's built into their contracts that they want to agree to it, or they do agree to it. And then we provide a lot more training to them to help them with that transition, as well as through understanding what they currently do in their own methods and how it can be transitioned or just reworded to work in how EPC companies will give them the information. So that was question one. What was question two, Stuart? Sorry.
What resistance have you encountered in implementation?
A lot of the resistance I've found is actually from the owners not understanding. And I've witnessed that from some of the big EPC companies around the world with their local legs not understanding. Their head offices, they push it down as main practices. But when you get down to the local regional ones, they don't understand it. So again, it's taking them back through what they need to do. And again, with subcontractors, when we stick out the bid questions right on the very first day, we ask them what they do actually understand. And when we get those questions back, it's nice and refreshing when they say, I don't understand it. So then we roll out presentations to them before they've submitted any bids, before they've even been shortlisted. So we're educating right at day one.
Yeah.
One thing that I think we need to mention is we've seen on a number of AWP projects incredible safety. We've seen millions of hours of work done with no safety incidents whatsoever. And that's often overlooked as one of the cost savings that you're going to get, because when a safety incident happens, you have to pretty much shut down the site. Whereas if we can have safer, more productive, more efficient projects, we're going to start seeing reductions in staff turnover. We're going to see people wanting to work on your projects because they're more likely to come home in one piece. And I think we have to factor that in as an important consideration.
Yeah,
sure.
Brilliant. Okay, so I've got
just an example on that one. We've seen that in just our material warehouses. They're getting material requests in a nice, organized manner. They're not having to rush to get materials. They're getting time to get those. And we always forget about the warehouses. If they're organized properly down at CWP level or IWP level, it's tidy. And when we get our workplace planners to get materials, they're going to, like you go to the screw fixers. You have a list of tag numbers. You get exactly what you need. You're not wasting materials. You're not losing materials. And you're not having to transport lots of materials.
Yeah, I can empathise with that, Stuart. Having been involved in the peripherals on a project recently that had a 7,000-mile logistics chain from the UK all the way down to the Falkland Islands. And unfortunately, when you pack things into a crate, it's going to arrive on site 3 months later, having gone down on a ship. And unfortunately, it goes through UK summertime. It goes through the tropics, so massively hot potential island, and then down to winter in the Falkland Islands. And you've got to make sure you pack everything in the right sequence, because when you get out the other end, the snow's coming down, the rain's coming down, and you start unpacking bits of plasterboard because you need to get to the back of the container. You've just wasted all the materials because it's all damaged. Yes, that happened. And no, I'm not going to mention who it was because it was pretty bad.
And I suppose in the same way is actually knowing what's in that container.
Well, I mean, there was a packing list, but the problem was it was all in the bag because they did the designs and everything 3 months before they got onto the site. So they shipped everything, and when they got there, it was like, well, what do we need first? Well, I don't know. The design's changed 14 times by now. Yes, not a pretty project at that point. So I've got some more questions coming down here. Been waiting very patiently down here. Karim has got a question here. To have effective AWP, I believe the silos need to be integrated, and this will take us to the same barrier of semantic enrichment of data we are facing in the BIM and now the twin world. How have you overcome that? I think that probably might be one for Gary, having been an implementer, but open to anybody here.
Well, I'll kick off. I mean, again, it lends itself to the smaller sites, of which there are across Europe and where I come from in Newport. And as I say, where you've got resident contractors, it's just success is just as important, not just for us, for the contractors on site. So that's the unity. You know, you're thinking of longevity. The site has been there for, well, since the 40s. You know, you want another 50 years manufacturing, another 100 years manufacturing. So, you know, they know that a good job means, you know, a successful job, a safe job means that they're going to be around and work is going to be there. So that helps a lot with the message, why we do it. We do it for success and, you know, being competitive. And remaining competitive at what we do. So that's easier done on the smaller sites. But that same message will apply and transfer across to your larger projects and your larger EPCs. We're in it together.
Excellent.
Yeah, I would say that's very. There's the obvious answer that I would give from that point of view is that education across the organization is going to help to further what those integrations look like. But there's certain tools in the AWP that aren't unique to AWP, but that are heavily used, such things as interactive planning sessions and those types of things around the path of construction development and such, which helps get everybody in the room. You'll generally see the first time you get them all in the room for an interactive planning session, they'll sit in the corners like this with their arms crossed, not wanting to participate. By the end of it, they're beating on a board saying, this is what we need here, when, and how. And you know you've got them, right? So getting them all in a room, they're going to fight it, but guess what? Nobody's going to stay quiet, because when it comes down to what affects them, they're going to get involved.
Yeah. There's a joint working group within CII that's actually working on data requirements, and that document is actually available to everybody, both CII members and non-CII members, and it outlines the kind of things that you should be asking when you're contracting work from a data perspective. Stuart, I'll make that available to you, and if you could fire that out to anyone that attended the webinar, you might find that a useful resource.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Lloyd. We've got a couple of minutes left. Was hoping to close out at the top of the hour. Is there any other questions that we haven't had?
There's one more question in the list here from Thiago. Here we go. So this should be a relatively simple question, I hope. It's always the death knell, isn't it? Should I understand that the correct sequence for applying the AWP is, now you're going to have to, there's some
POC is path of construction.
Yeah, so you've got that up.
APS is work breakdown structure.
Yeah.
CWA is construction work areas. And then they're talking about engineering work packages, procurement work packages, and construction work packages, and installation work packages. We're big on 3-letter acronyms.
I can see you're better than the military. You know, blimey, there's a lot in there. So is that, I've just popped it up on so everybody in the audience can also see that question. So looking at that in the chat window, is that the correct sequence? That is that how the cycle runs?
I think I'll answer that one. The path of construction will follow underneath all of those. So initially the WBS is set up for the project. It needs cost codes, it needs structures that way. And then as you start developing the project down, your path of construction will get more detailed into those areas. So really the path of construction starts at the project and will develop all the way down into the IWPs as it gets more granular as it comes down.
So
yeah, I would agree with you. It's not really sequential necessarily in that basis, that there's kind of a mix of process and package into this question, where a path of construction is a process with an outcome. CWAs, EWPs, PWPs, those are physical packages, but they all have a bit of an evolutionary basis, that they don't all happen in a sequence and they don't all happen at the same time. They kind of influence each other as you move through the life cycle of the project. So it's not entirely wrong. WBS being WB work breakdown structure, when you develop that, you need to take into account you're going to develop CWAs and CWPs, because a CWA technically usually is your level 2 schedule item. A CWP is directly relational to your level 3 schedule item, typically. So you can see how the WBS ties into it, and they all integrate with each other. In not necessarily a sequential basis like this, but they're all very important in the project life cycle in their correct position.
Yeah.
So one thing I will say, and this is a blatant plug, at the European conference, you're going to see pretty much everybody in this panel, plus probably another 400 practitioners. And so we're going to have the opportunity to have some really interesting discussions and explorations around AWP. So strongly recommend that you consider attending the virtual conference.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you.
We've now gone through the extra time and we're into penalties. That's a football analogy. Soccer, beg your pardon. So what I'm going to do now is if I can, if you don't mind, I'll just go through the rest of the slides just to close out. Thanks to our sponsors, O2 Business and Rebim. Thanks to Ian and Jerry for helping me put this together. Thanks to Lloyd, thanks to Gary, thanks to Stuart, Jeff, Robin for giving me the slides and being super sports today. We've had a great session. Thank you. Join the conversation with lots going on social media. The webinar recording will be made available on the Commit website, and we'll share that externally as well. And yeah, there's the extra time, and it's a case of thank you very much. I will arrange to get the video. Jeff's video is superb. I must say it is absolutely superb. We'll get that crafted in to the gap, and then we'll share. And if there's any other send outs, we'll share that as well. But it remains just to say thanks very much for everybody, the participants. Thanks for the questions, and everybody for your support and turning up today. Marvelous. Thank you very much. Have a great week, everybody.
Great, that was fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you.
Keep safe, everyone. Keep safe.
Cheers now. Bye-bye.
Bye.